The reference that we'll be painting. And to start out, I'm just going to be mixing up some transparent color on my palette. So I'm going to be taking like a quinacridone, that's a red, and maybe magenta here, just a nice like kind of pink transparent color. And then maybe something in this like ultramarine over here for a slightly darker tone. So just to draw this out, I'm going to be using a little bit of my very clean turp from my turp jar. And if your turp jar is not that clean, just pour out a little bit of Gamsol just by Gamblin, or you can use terpenoid. But what you want to do is have something that's very low odor. So don't buy anything from the hardware store. You really want like the low odor mineral spirits um, are the best. Low VOC, odorless mineral spirits. So now that I have this nice transparent color, it's very like, I just put a little terp on the palette. You can kind of see I'm mixing that together until I get a nice thin consistency of paint, and it's very see-through and very forgiving and movable. I'm going to come over to my canvas at this time, and we're going to start by just kind of locating these big shapes. So, for this image, like I definitely want to stay pretty loose and kind of see that my brush is being held way back here. And we're just going to kind of let the brush do its thing. I'm not trying to get like a specific line or edge, just directional marks, just starting out. Think of that as an oval. All right, so I toned this canvas. As you can see, it is not a white canvas that I'm painting on. And I highly recommend that you do the same. I think that, see, I think that painting on a white canvas can be a nice way. Like, there's no wrong way to start a painting. My goodness, absolutely not. But, for me, like the quicker I can set up the image and the quicker I can see the image sort of take shape, the more benefits I see from starting in that way, right? So, like, I think that because I can see these take shape so quickly against this mid-tone wash that I'm painting over, and in a moment you'll see why, right? Like, I can go dark, but I can also kind of go lighter. So that really is a time saver, and it's not just about saving time, it's really about the process, like simplifying what we're doing, not, noodling around and trying to get all of the details in. It allows me to sort of see the overall forms and the light and shadow pattern more quickly, and to really focus on getting that pattern locked into my painting as soon as possible. Because it's not really about the little lily pads or the individual petals and getting that just so. It's really about this shape, and then this shape. And if I had to say which kind of basic compositional shape we're looking at, I definitely think this is a very classic S-shaped composition. You guys can see it, right? It's very S-shaped. I mean, it's literally an S. Isn't that just so fun? Okay, so that's going to be fun. It's a good structure. We'll disguise it. There'll be lots of stuff happening. It's not going to be like this totally obvious S. But I do think that that is something to immediately focus on right out of the gate. Better to see you starting with like a big S on your canvas and then filling in lily pads and petals and leaves than to be noodling away at like a petal that looks perfect, but it has no place It has no like structure. There's nothing like holding it into this picture, right? So these things are going to be something that we like kind of let develop and find throughout this process. Now, that's a nice dynamic line. Do we need balance here? Like that. This is the fun part where you really can be like very, abstract. Like I kind of want like this direction and then that direction, balanced by that direction. It's that same S curve. It's just a little bit like more angular, I guess. And then we might as well just like draw this like big arrow shape right into our composition. Ha ha ha. Okay, so that's the composition. And it doesn't look wrong. It looks okay. We're good. So now we really have to get serious. That was the easy part, I think. It's like now we really have to work out some recognizable imagery without noodling it into the actual ground. And what's better to do that than to switch brushes? We're going to let that little guy go. We're going to look for a slightly larger brush. You know what I'll do? The fastest way to see the image is usually the best course of action here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I have this pink underpainting. That's the color that I toned the canvas, right? So if I took something for that watercolor and just scrubbed it in really lightly, I'd almost immediately have my canvas filled with the appropriate colors. I'd see this image right away, right? So imagine if I made that kind of water shape, like more blue-gray. That's what we're going to do. That's what we'll do right now. Switch to this, and you can see that happening on the palette. So I'm mixing this kind of like blue-gray color, and I just started with cobalt. Now at this stage, I don't love using white. I don't really need it yet. And if I can hold off the session that I'm working, like the painting session, the hour and a half, it goes more smoothly. So I work transparently as long as possible, and then I begin to bring in white, which is a more opaque color. So this color looks, of course, incredibly dark and a little wrong, but we're going to see what it looks like when it spreads out on the palette. You can kind of see that. I kind of like it. Let's see what it looks like when it scrubs onto the painting, shall we? I think we shall. Let's go for it. Okay, here's painting view. And we're just going to take a little, again, it's really thin because I want to do this in a scrubby way. Let's start where we kind of know we're sort of safe. It's going to be very dark. Whoa, that's way too dark. All right, I need like a bunch more terp. I just put all this terp on the palette. You could see I should have shown you. I wiped my brush. I just dabbed that out. So I'm not just dousing my surroundings in terp. We don't want that. And when I say terp, I like Gamsol, but I'm not going to say Gamsol because as a word, it's just not as convenient. So I'm just going to say terp. I was raised on terp. All right. Oh, that's so much better. Check that out. If we could just almost get like a little stain on the canvas to show what will be this blue-gray. And it's reading as a really nice blue-gray. I think I'm happy with that color. Now I'm going to be kind of careful and sort of thinking more about the drawing than I typically do, but I don't want to zone in. Oh no, I can't be like noodling out little, petals and trying to get light and shadow or anything. And if you are struggling with this, just know you're not alone. It is so hard to simplify. I think that is like the key. It's just something I work on a lot. I think I've worked on this for like, a really, really long time. And I think maybe it didn't come that easy to me. It's really hard to kind of keep your focus on like the larger and more, I guess, fundamental, not simple. We're gonna say fundamental colors, values, and shapes when there are so many things going on the surface. You know, you really want to kind of see things for not their details, but like their big, if you had to simplify it down into one or two colors and one or two shapes, what would that be? Then your next pass over it is a little bit more detailed, a little closer in. Get a little closer each time. And mastering the consistency of the paint during a study, I really think is the key to success. Do not start with really thick paint, in my experience now, or go and do it and then make a beautiful painting and tell me I'm totally wrong. But like what I think is true and what works for me is to start this with a thin wash. That's almost going to be something that sets up. Now, here's where people run into trouble. Here's the hard thing to show on video, too. It's that although this is very thin, it is not super drippy and wet, okay? It is not drippy and wet. It's thin and it's moving, but it's just wet enough to get it to move, okay? I don't want to put down like this enormous amount of, I don't see any drip marks, but there are no dry marks either. So it's kind of like just in that sweet spot of consistency, I will say. For me, that's pretty good. I like it. It's like a dusting. We're still going quickly. Let's see if I can wipe it off. I really can't. Like it's almost setting up already. It's kind of staining. I think this is a pretty good consistency. And if I could describe this to you anymore, I would, because I really think that that is the key. This is where it's at. People kind of go off the rails here. And I know I went off the rails here for a very, very long time, not understanding that you really have to consider that you'll be painting on this for the next hour and a half. And if you've ever struggled with just wet, sloppy paint, you know that that's a very unpleasant thing to struggle with. And so we're just going to avoid that as long as we can. And as long as we can means as long as like this consistency remains useful. Remains useful means that I can continue to describe and like I'm improving the layer, right? So I'm like, okay, yeah, I could put like a little bit more here. That helps. That helps. But there'll be a point when like there isn't anything else I can do with this little consistency. And I'm going to tell you when that is coming up. And until that time, I'll work with this. I'm just kind of drawing that in. It just stops being useful. It's really kind of fun to see. But you have to run this process so many times in order to, kind of sense when that is, unless you're just really lucky or you just take to this magically or I don't know, whatever. But like you do need some experience to see when this works for you. And you'll see when this like transparent paint stops being useful. It's just, and then it's done. So the things that I'm trying to simplify it down to are essentially value. If I am going to squint my eyes so that I can barely see detail, color. That's the look I'm going for at this stage. All right. Okay. Everything gets a little bit darker towards the foreground. As we see these darker shapes. Let's get that in. This is a study after all. We're not going to spend forever. I'm just kind of going around, and this color that I'm using, it's probably a mix of some Prussian blue, some Perylene black for sure, a little bit of the quinacridone magenta slash red combo I love to use. Anything quinacridone is just absolutely perfection. It's just really good. All right, I feel like the background, that's all I can really do with the transparent stuff. Maybe a little bit here. Tone that down. Not exactly the consistency that's most helpful. Let's see if I can't improve that. Okay. Now, the one place I do want to do a little bit more transparent work is in the flowers themselves. And I'm going to just kind of switch colors for that. And ooh, maybe even switch brushes. I'll take this smaller. This is a flat. It's an evergreen from Rosemary and Company, if you don't say. It's a really lovely brush company, and I highly recommend that you check out their products. I was going to say their work because it is like artwork. It's totally beautiful. They have a great line of brushes, and I've been using them for a really long time. I think they're terrific. Okay, so as I was doing that, I was like forgetting what color I was mixing for. So we're gonna go a little bit more magenta, but I just sort of muted that down a little bit. I was wondering what I was doing in that cooler pile of paint, and it was muted. Okay, so this is, let's see, is that too muted? Do we like that? I really am careful about pinks. It's just so challenging to get a nice strong magenta because you need like a base color underneath that's fairly light. Okay, so if I were to go a little bit too warm, too dark, too reddish, I really can't do this magenta over top unless I were to lighten the color first and then proceed after that's dry. Or I need a little bit more movement in this paint. It's feeling like it's not movable. There we go. And I'm not trying to draw individual petals, although it may sort of look like that, but I am trying to find the shape of that like magenta dark shadow color, which I guess also describes the petals. Yes, it's true. So in a way I am describing the petals, but I'm not thinking of them as petals, as you can tell from what I just said. And I think it's important that you forget what you're painting. Don't worry about the fact that these are petals. Worry more that there is a dark shape here. We don't see the end here so much. It disappears. All this is sort of darker. And we're just kind of like sculpting with color. All right. More challenging is the other lilies because they are lighter. It's a little bit more challenging at this stage. So now that I have this light pink color, I'm going to try and simplify down, looking for that V shape, looking at the direction that the marks go. Where is it heavier? Where is there a little bit of brushy kind of activity back there. And I'm squinting the whole time I am painting. I really have my eyes like half closed. So it helps. I have some kind of drawing situation here. I need to grab a little bit of the blue. Oops, I've got the wrong color on that brush. And by blue, I just mean this kind of transparent blue gray. And you guys, isn't this something? I have not used any white yet. I'm still in transparent paint. Okay, I want to cut into this a little bit to figure out where I'll have petals. I can kind of see that. So if this is something that helps take your mind off of anything that you'd like to take your mind off of, even just for a little while, so that you can continue to think about it later, then I highly recommend you pick up a paintbrush or even colored pencils. You can use any materials that you want to create this image. And honestly, I still think that you could kind of follow along with this tutorial, because the way that we are approaching this is very general, right? Just that's the same way you want to be with any material that you're working with. You don't want to get too into the specifics too soon. Going back and getting a little bit of definition around these petals, because what's behind these petals is a deep, deep magenta color that's reflected from the flower above. So by just kind of painting that in, I now have the opportunity to define where we're going to see that happen. Thinking about the directional qualities, there's so much to consider as we're kind of at this stage. It's a really fun stage. It's like mental juggling or something. Things fall apart sometimes, but you know, you usually get them back together. So I'm just dashing this around a little bit. I often tell people, if you want a loose painting with lots of marks and brush strokes and everything, then by all means start making those marks immediately. As soon as you start painting. So let's switch this then. All right. Let's see. Actually, I'm gonna just leave this up next to the picture because I can't really. If I hold it, it's probably gonna block your camera view. So we'll just see what I can do here. But, you know, as I was saying, this really does apply to just about any material that you want to make some art with. You know, choose your material, and you're gonna want to start general and then work your way towards the specific kind of gradually. So if you recall, we just had like big circular blobs. They became kind of discs. We first had a pink background down, so just tone your canvas pink. And then you can paint around that with like a really thin wash of blue gray, and instantly you have these kind of flower-like forms. Now, if that's your style, maybe that's where you depart. And you're like, hey, I just want to make these flower-like forms, just kind of like, you know, almost abstract. You can take it from there, right? However, if you are going for maybe a more painterly result, something a little bit more descriptive, right? You can still start that way. So it all kind of starts from that same place of like simplification, of just being really loose with what you're seeing. And then just, I think, practicing. Oh my gosh. All right, so I'm kind of just thinking I want a few marks. And I want a really faint color just to kind of start building that in. Looks so watercolory right now. I kind of like it as is almost. And I see a little bit of like a blue, a cooler color in here. I'm going to go in with a little bit right now. And I do feel like we are now nearing the end of our usefulness with transparent hues. Although, what is this drawing situation? Oh, this is a lily pad. I'm just going to tone that down. There's something over here that's calling out danger. It's not right. Let me grab something. There we go. Again, it's an S shape. We talked a little bit about that at the beginning. We started drawing. It was very clear that that S shape was like holding everything together. As we draw, little things come in, we kind of build. The S shape sort of disappears, doesn't it? So every now and again, just reassess. Are we still kind of on track with feeling that nice compositional movement that we felt earlier? Because sometimes details and marks can come in and they can make things feel more static. And we sort of lose that dynamic, that sense of like the flowing kind of line through the composition that can be temporarily lost. And this is a good stage to just go back and maybe revisit. I'm gonna cool this down. This is a little watery though. I wouldn't be surprised if that starts dripping. And by watery, I mean just too thin and kind of terpy. But that's okay. I think it's staying put. I just wish it were a little bit less terpy. Okay. So we got pretty far into the description here with this transparent mix, still not using any white paint. And I really like, what I really like? I'll tell you. This transparent teal. So the minute I see something that's working in my painting, I'm like, let's do more. Let's do so much more until I do way too much and then it's trouble. That's okay. We're just going to do a little bit more. We like that teal quite a bit. I think that's a beautiful color. And here we go. Yeah, not everything has to have that magenta. And if it doesn't, if it's next to a cool, that magenta could just be so much more effective, so much more glowy. Now we're going for glowy. And even if it's like a little dark and a little moody, maybe I'll kind of keep it that way because that's just how I am. And that's what I want this painting to look like. And I also feel like this little teal number is just nicely tying it into the background and kind of into what's going on there. But again, we're almost into opaque territory now. So we're going to move into mixing colors with a palette knife and building this up with like really, finishing brush strokes of paint. Here's a little weird. Okay, there we go. That's essentially all we're gonna do with that. So the transparent layer is done. That's the underpainting. I'm stepping back to look at it so we can all enjoy a moment of silence as I do so. Opaque paint time. All right. We have all this stuff on our palette, but surprise, I'm not going to clean it off. I don't think I really need to. I think this is all just lovely, usable paint. And like, for example, if this color was for the water, now I'll just mix the opaque color for the water in this area. I'm not cleaning it. I'm just gathering up any leftover paint so I can kind of use it again. And let's see, I'm going to have I have like a cloth rag here. It's very key to have a cloth rag. I also have a folded paper towel. And that's typically what I'm going to use to, like, I'll wipe my palette knife on this. And that I can use for like a whole session. And then for this, I can use this multiple sessions, but I really try to use this just for my brush if possible. And that'll be multiple sessions if I can remember to not use my palette knife on the cloth rag. So, as I was saying, we're going to do some opaque paint mixing. And I'm just going to take this enormous chunk of white paint to start with. I like to gather my ingredients. Palette knife on the paper towel. I see some ultramarine blue. I'll put that over here. Let's see. It's like a Prussian blue. I'll put that over there. I do believe I like teal so much in this painting elsewhere that it would be a shame not to use it in the water, don't you think? Absolutely, I'm sure you agree. I'll put some teal there. So, all right, we're going to do a little mixing and then we'll see how do we want to gray this down. I kind of suspect like maybe a little, oh, that was very dirty. Apologies. But luckily that paint was horrifyingly old anyway, so no harm done. There we go. A little burnt umber, kind of like a dark orangey brown. And what I'm going to do is start to mix a lighter color so we can see it. I'll mix into it. I'm not necessarily going for the color on the reference exactly. I have many options, and I might mix a few. Wow. A Prussian blue, an ultramarine blue, a little of the teal blue. It's a bit, I don't know, juvenile. Sorry to say. Doesn't it just look a little bit like, you know, I added a little burnt umber to it because I just think that gives it just such a nice note of complementary color. It's all about that like slightly muted tone. Just want to play around with it for a minute. It's a bit green. A bit green. You know what I think would be perfect with something a bit green is some of the magenta that we're using in the foreground. That'll be a really nice way to like relate the background and the foreground together. And now this feels like such a beautiful gray to me. I don't know. I like it a lot better than that like super juvenile one, but maybe I went a little too gray. I don't know. So let's add a little more teal to it. So we've got teal. We've got Prussian blue, we've got ultramarine blue, we've got quinacridone magenta, we've got burnt umber, and we've got white. If you don't have those colors, you can get very close to this color, if not exactly matched to this color, likely with another method. I kid you not. It's possible. I couldn't do it right now because I want to paint this, but like maybe that would be a fun assignment to try and match a color with like a totally different set of colors. Or I would use like cerulean blue, and I mean I could maybe see substituting okay, and now see I can't get into this now, people. I'm not gonna get into it. Back to the task at hand. All right, so we've got at least one color. Let's test it out. Let's see what happens. As you can see, I'm really loading this brush. Lots of paint. That doesn't mean I'm going to just like put it down in this, like I'm buttering a piece of bread or something. I still want to have a little bit of, oh, that's a really pretty color. Wow. Okay, I want to have a little bit of consistency from this lower layer show through. I don't need to spread super duper thick paint right now. And if I did, I'd put it on the flowers. I wouldn't put it back here. So I'm going to go back and get a slightly lighter variation with a little bit more ultramarine blue. And then we'll try and build in some interest here. Because if it's all the same color, it's like the color doesn't do anything. It only does something next to a color that brings it out. So I think that more greenish teal version looks really beautiful against like a little more purple. And I'll even grab a little magenta back here just to kind of soften it. So I'm going lighter and a little more magenta. I'm going to be really careful with my white paint here. I want to get a little bit more. Wipe, swipe, we'll clean the palette knife, and I'll just put that white here. Now I don't have to worry about it, like if I mess it up or not. That stuff is fair game. I get to brush mix now. I just really try not to contaminate all my source colors. But there are times, people. All right. I really like some of that kind of scumbly where you see the canvas show through here and there, especially because that peach color is so glowy. I think if I covered everything, it would just look so closed in. Let's go a little more. I want to change this up just a little bit. I don't like the background to be too consistent almost ever. I mean, it kind of indicates space to me when we have this little change in color, change in value, change in intensity. I mean, I think that's just such a beautiful way to kind of like shorthand space receding. So creating all these variations, it might seem like it's kind of tedious or whatever, but I actually really love this part of painting. Okay, this one's probably even a little more green, a little stronger, a little darker. And I know this is all just a bit darker than the reference, but I want to make sure that it's dramatic. So I think I'm pushing this value just a little bit darker. I don't want to go too dark, It's like you have to kind of balance things out. Now, I love the darker and more green idea next to these lighter, more pink, hint complementary to green, lily pads, but I don't want to totally throw this balance off. There are these these green lily pads in here, and I want to make sure that those feel they're part of the same environment. So again, I'm leaving some of that like earlier layer show through. You can see I'm putting the paint on in a variety of ways. Okay, so like first, I can kind of come through and like just lightly drag the paint across. If we see, you know, an area that we want to go back over in a few minutes, I can absolutely build on top of that and make a mark that's got even like a little bit of like body to it that really stands out off of the canvas. So yeah, I'm just kind of loosely throwing this in because I feel myself maybe just sensing the time pass, you know? Like, I gotta move on this thing. A quick study is a quick study, am I right? So let's just blast through this because it needs to be done. And the reason it needs to be done is because you know what? Like you'll keep that loose approach, and that's what's so interesting. That's what I think makes painting so fascinating, so successful. Is when they're loose, descriptive on the first try. If I'm going to sit here noodling, I will lose that possibility. So let's do a little more palette knife gathering here. I'm going to take all this paint up and consolidate. I see a lighter batch over here. We can make that a little more official. Another big chunk of white. And again, I just put colors out here, and then I don't really have to worry about cleaning the palette knife in between each mix. All right, I want to just go a little bit lighter, maybe a little bit grayer, kind of next to this flower back here. And I'm cutting maybe into the flower just a bit. But I know that when I come back through with the opaque paint for the flowers, I can just bring them right back over this water. I want to keep this one a little smaller, a little softer. Oh, that sits down so much better now. Yay. Okay. It's not even really correct according to the reference. I have this lily pad up here, but I just like that so much better. Randomly throwing a mark here, a mark here, maybe one there. Got to develop everything together. Colors should be shared. So move it around. If you've got a color on your brush, throw a few marks someplace if you can. All right. A very tiny adjustment to green. What is this amazing green called again? Look. Cadmium green. Like, ow. That's where I keep that camera. So, just so you know. All right, so this is a cadmium green. And I'm just slightly adjusting our watercolor because that's what I really see for these lily pads, like the classic green. Ooh, look how much paint I have on my hand. Be right with you. All right. So, it's interesting to kind of look and just notice how the painting is getting filled in. I see those unpainted green lily pad areas just like popping forward when I compare that to the reference when I look at it on my computer screen, as you are currently seeing it. In real life, not as much. So I'll just go ahead and, I was moving in that direction to block them in. So we're going to do that. A little movement, a little form there. I think they're really visible though because of the crinkly little shadows and all those curled little edges and highlights and things, but barely visible. They're not very, they're not standing out like high contrast. All right, and how I'm loading this brush, I am pushing down on that palette. I am picking up as much paint as I possibly can on my brush. And I really have like a big glump of paint, if you can see that. Quite glumpy. And so, as I come back to the canvas, I have no problem just really laying that down. Probably the last time that lily pad is going to be touched with paint in this painting. So some of this I'm just doing because it's in back of the flower, and we just need to get into the flower and start defining that space. That's a very light edge. Lighten that up a little bit. There we go. And now I'll just throw the lily pad in higher than it really is. I drew it too high. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. We're going to be okay. Ooh, that yellow is not going to be okay, though. Well, now I get to show you my lovely razor for scraping off old paint. And if you're wondering what kind of palette this is a thick, like it's like a 1/4 inch piece of glass that's beveled on the sides and like has that like nice soft beveled edge. I bought it at a glass store. You can just squeeze your paint right out onto that glass palette and you can mix right on there. And then you can use a razor blade to scrape off any remaining paint. Nice and clean. But if you don't have that, a disposable palette is a really good way to go. So just kind of keep in mind there are definitely maintenance issues with a glass palette, but it's really lovely to mix on. You can just clean it right off. It's terrific. Okay. I squeezed out yellow, and the reason I did that is because I need this green to be a little bit more green. Let's consolidate. When I want a little bit more of that cadmium green too. Oh, guys, it's terrible. I'm sorry. I forget where my camera is one more time. It's like at eye level and like looking at my palette, and I cannot believe I keep running into it, but it's probably going to happen again. This will be the last comment I make about it. All right. Ooh, pretty. Okay, here we go. A little green on the palette, green on the brush. All right, so I just mixed a lot more paint. Needed it. Warm it up with a little bit of the cadmium yellow medium. That's going to give us a little more like color contrast. I want the greens to be very subdued, but I want to see them in a few places. A little bit more. All right, and now I want to put in a little, I've left a tiny bit of space, a teeny tiny bit of space, and I want to do this dark to anchor underneath some of these cast shadows. We'll just take that dark and make it purple. All right, let's try it here. Nice and open space. Lots of paint on the brush, starting where I know I'm safe, moving up to the edge. Okay. Maybe as we get a little further back, these darks are just going to lighten up ever so slightly. Okay, so that your dark here in the foreground is going to be, that's the anchor. That's going to be like the darkest one. And so we have this like believable progression as it moves back. I'm just kind of rolling the side of my brush. And like I said, I did leave some of those spaces kind of like intentionally open, like there's no paint there. So I don't have to paint over a whole ton of wet paint. There's actually just that first transparent layer there. See, that's what I mean. Like I would never have figured that out at first when I first started painting. It took a while. Like, oh, I see. You have to like plan to leave open that little space that you're going to fill in later. But now I think that lily pad right there is coming along pretty nicely. And I don't know that I could have put that paint right over the top of my wet paint. I might have been able to get something down, but it sure turned out a whole lot better because I left that room. Now I'm working around a little bit and reinforcing our S shape composition again to get a little curve pool and some stuff right there just to be draw it in that way. A little darker, maybe a corresponding stuff. And maybe a stronger dark here. Oh, and then there's all these little it's like directional. The wipes with this dark color are going to do that, but I kind of want to have a little bit more movement in my paint. So now we're going to talk about this lovely tube of or bottle or whatever it is. It's a bottle and it is 50-50 linseed oil with Gamsol. So it's a little bit thinner than just that thick, oily linseed, but it's definitely got more body to it than that thin Gamsol. Okay. So this is the mix that I typically paint with. I don't use much medium and I don't really recommend that people use like a ton of medium. Just if you need a little movement, this is a nice, really basic way to add just a little bit of movement to your paint. So that being said, what am I going to do with it? All right, well, I know I want to paint into this area a little bit. And we're just kind of getting our water lines, little shadow lines. I want that to just glide over the surface. If I wanted even more movement, I can go over here. This is for that. And down here, that paint is really flowy now. However, it's not going to be the easiest paint to work back into, but luckily I don't have to. That's pretty much done. Let's just use it to sketch a little bit. It's just on the brush. It seems easy. Some cool stuff happening here. Okay, let's see if I can describe a little bit more about what's going on here without. All right, and remember, these are still totally open paint forms, and so are the reflections, really, and we got to do something about that. Before we move on, we have to do something about these reflections. Need more white paint on my palette. Okay. Okay, we are coming up on like 1 hour, and I think we are going to be able to get this done within the next like 20 to 25 minutes. So that's my aim. I'm going to try and, we're going to go through and let's get some opaque paint on the flowers. The first thing I'm going to do is start with this background flower. It's really soft. It's very light, but I bet you it has some of the watercolor I mean, how could it not? It is literally floating in water. If I didn't add a little bit of that watercolor, it just wouldn't feel like it was part of that environment. So if you notice this color, it is so far off of white paint. You know, it's totally like a light pink. It might, someone might walk by and go, oh, yeah, that's white or something, or like off white. But it's definitely, it's like having to do with that gray watercolor. It's got a little bit of the flower color in it. I'm going to make a few variations of that. There's a more pink, kind of darker. Wow, so pretty. But I don't want to use all of that pink strength in the background. It's too strong. We have to save our strongest hues for the foreground and the midground because that's really where we see them. So I dulled that out with some teal. Teal's a very green blue. And that will just take it down like a notch. It's not going to totally violet it. It will also like make it a little bit more muted, and give it some sophistication. Will no longer be a pastel color entirely, just because the teal is more green. Okay, here we go. So background to foreground is a great way to approach this when working quickly. Less fuss. I won't say no fuss, but like less fuss. I found that color dark. Now we're going lighter. I think everything's just a little darker than I wanted it, but whatever. I like to start darker, actually. I actually try to build paintings that way, taking into consideration that we will be adding those lights, right? Like dark to light is a typical working method for oil painting. All right. I want to like totally change gears and mix a little bit of like a really bright. It's going to go right next to that violet. It's going to be a really bright white yellow. We need it here too. We need some white to like pop. I'm not blocking this view entirely. So you'll notice that paint consistency is, it's thin, it's somewhat dryish. It's not even filling the canvas holes. You know, the weave of the canvas is still open. So now I'm changing over to like a really faint light pink. And that is like a finishing level of paint. Like I don't want any more paint there. Hopefully that's kind of done. All right. So if anyone is watching this tutorial and would like to request literally anything, and I'll give you examples of the types of things that I mean you can request. I would love your feedback. I am just starting this out. I was doing some live painting where I would do this live. And my first question is, does it matter if it's live? Does it help you if it's live? Do you kind of feel like it's more interesting to watch it live where you can ask me questions? Probably the answer is going to be yes on that, but let's just talk about it. I'd love to know. I was wondering also if you could, if you have any feedback on like the camera angles, the views, the microphone, the lighting, anything that you'd like to see more of, like one view, more of the palette view, more of the painting view. This is the, mixed view where you see all three, whichever you're kind of preferring. If you let me know, wow, that'd be so cool. I don't know. Anything else? Like, honestly, if there's different kinds of tutorials that you want, multi-part tutorials, you want to see a painting develop from, a couple of weeks or. Now, those are just my examples I could think of off the top of my head, but I'm open to your questions, suggestions, whatever it is you want, because I really would like to add a lot of video tutorials to the website for our students and build out some new and exciting things to offer. Moving on to this next flower right now. I'm just kind of putting in some lights throughout. Like I said, moving through, if you've got a color on your brush that's working, find another spot for it. The inside of that light petal right there. Background. Something back here. We're going to see if we could just randomly throw a mark, which I do all the time. Why not? Need a little more palette knife mixing. A variety of the deeper reds and pinks. That's what I'm mixing. Oh, wow. Here we go, opaque paint. We're doing it. Incredibly loud truck. Okay. We see it down here too. Just a little snowplow outside, I think. We're just doing a little salting. So if you're hearing that really loud noise, that's what's going on there. Better late than never. It snowed a little while ago. So All right, here we go. We're just gonna wrap this up with darker red color. Again, I'm leaving a few places kind of underpainted a little bit where we can come back through and we can add in like totally different colors. I see a little yellow poking through here and there. And I just want to make sure that I have, if possible, some bare canvas where I can easily make that color happen. It's not an absolute deal breaker, but because you can use wet paint over wet paint. So just kind of throwing these colors in, leaving a little space if possible. That's kind of how I think about it. All right, and we're just gonna come through here. Now this lighter color, I'm just using to sort of blast through this first lily pad. It's much lighter. I love all of those little blue teal marks, and I will mix some up that's opaque to kind of match that as well. A little more definition. And again, I left that space open. I painted in some lighter color up here. I left the space open. I'm going to come back in, paint the dark in, and then brush it into the light. And that seems to, be pretty effective and pretty quick. So again, I'll just, I'm going to go through that process. I'll just repeat that one more time. What I did was I took my light color paint. I put that where I believed it was going to go. And then I left room for where that really nice, dark, intense kind of pink is going to be. Here I am filling in that space. And then all I have to do is flick the two colors together, and it really makes that nice dimensional quality. Okay. All right, I'll do that again. If it works, by all means, keep going. Really light this time. Maybe with a touch of blue. We'll cool that down just a little bit because we just want to kind of finish this up. Like I said earlier, it's very important to keep that style and that like spirit of painting consistent and not start going like, okay, well, I'll just turn this into like a long painting and I'm sure it'll be better. It probably won't be. And the only reason I say that is because like it would be great if you did this as a long painting, but it wasn't set up that way. So just start again and just set it up longer. Um, I tell myself and anyone that will listen. Because I've had that same idea like, oh, this quick study is dragging. Let me just turn it into a long painting. And really, what happens is you kind of lose the spirit of it. And so I'm really trying very much to stick to it, get it done. By my clock, I have about 10 minutes. get these light ends in. I actually really like that other method better of starting with the light side and then leaving some dark off, coming back and blending them together. Let's see what it needs. All right, I think it needs a little room. And even though it's kind of like counterintuitive, sometimes a few minutes left, you just have to clean up a little bit and like get yourself into a good spot to complete the painting. Sometimes a little bit of flicking around the paint that you already have. There we go. So if there is a place where you have a soft edge, if you have an overlapping edge, you can come back through. Well, it doesn't have any paint on it. And you can take your brush and just kind of move that wet paint around if it is oil. And if you have enough of it on your surface. So just kind of flicking the paint around sometimes does some really nice refining to your surface. And I'm just kind of looking at the reference, seeing kind of what it needs each area. Like, you know, is this dark something that should spread up and out? Yes, it should. So I'll just make that happen with my brush. Back in here, do we see some confusion about where these marks are going? I'm going to cut in. There we go. Okay. That's probably all I can do with the brush. I want to like consolidate my pinks. The pink here is just so important. It has to be really clean and really nice. And that's what I will try and do. I don't even want to necessarily keep those. I just kind of want to mush them out. Just take them out here, make a pile of mush, and maybe we'll be using that for something later, but I don't know. Okay. Let's see if we can't even get a little bit more clean. There we go. Before we do that, I'm just gonna do a little softening with my brush, moving that paint around if possible. And this is all like kind of within reason. You know, once you reach the limit and it stops being useful, definitely don't do any more of this because technically you could overblend very easily. All right, and I do want a little bit of this very nice purple. Fill that in. adding these highlights to kind of finish some of these petals a little bit more. All right. You want to lighten this up back here and just have this sense of like receding form just based on the light and shadow. The other thing I'll notice too is that even allowing your oil painting to just sit for a few minutes, honestly, it makes a little bit of a difference in the way the paint lays down. So if you are, painting wet over wet, this is just a quick study. I definitely see that difference. Mm-hmm. Back. All right. A little more teal, as promised. We're going to go back in. Anything that works, let's do more of it. I think that is a nice color to kind of unify things. I don't know. It's a little cooler. It really helps, I think, make the pink look a little more dramatic. And you have that contrast next to it. And I see it in there. If you look, you can definitely pick up a lot of cool tones in these, flowers that are light pink or white or whatever you want to describe them as. Generally, there really are a lot of cool tones, a lot of blues. So using that and just emphasizing it. Anything that you see is completely fair game. Why not? You can paint it any color you like. You can also make a recording of yourself painting it and put it on the internet. I'm gonna kind of get in here and make a few lighter marks that I can like use to create a sense of almost like transparent. They have this kind of glowy quality where the light passes through the petals. And I think that this cooler color is sort of key to getting that. Remember, it's going to be reflected as well. And this stuff, if you can kind of notice, I'm making a few marks that just blast through. And that's because this flower is in the environment, and why not have that reflected in like the very way that you're painting it? And what I mean by that is that, you can kind of take those colors from the water and flick through, and vice versa. You can take the flower color here. So just kind of weaving them together. You'll know when you go too far because it just won't work anymore. I just change that shape a little. I'm just kind of playing around with how am I going to finish this up in the next like 3-4 minutes. I need something down here. Red. And that is really the contrast that I think like we need to see everything that I just did. And I definitely want that to be visible. Washing this stuff together as a little quick study reflection. That looks okay. Let's go for it. Really need a blue color. Let's grab our teal and our white and our everything that was making that nice watercolor. Here we go. Yeah, a few marks across the reflections can do a lot towards making those reflections feel like they're kind of sitting in the water. So see that little brush stroke I'm kind of dragging across. Not all of the marks have to go across, obviously, but you need some to kind of make sure that it feels grounded. And I'm just kind of looking at the overall light and shadow pattern. Try to finish this up very quickly. All right, and then finally, anything really, really nice, bright, light highlight. If we can get a little something to show up. There with our white paint. The permanent rose is a lovely color. There's so many good colors on my palette right now. It's really hard to stop painting with them. It's really fun. I've expanded a lot lately, and over the years, I think adding certain colors and replacing others has been a fun part of the process. You guys would like any videos on using color or choosing color at the store, let me know. And yeah, wrapping this up, I just would love if you have any feedback on the video, feedback on things you'd like to see. Feel free to drop a comment. If you could potentially give me a follow slash a like slash a share, that would be really helpful. And I'm definitely going to do more of these. So let me know if showing a live painting video is more, you know, entertaining or interesting or, helpful, whatever it is, than seeing something pre-recorded. Let me know. All right. Fix this up a little bit. All right, so for my last couple of seconds here, I'm just gonna soften this up a little bit. Edge softening is a really good way to just bring a little refining. We want this to recede in space, so maybe I don't need so many little contrasty edges. Maybe I can kind of paint through that shape a little bit and soften the edges, just visually, you know? All right. A little final highlights on that. All right, and we're just gonna call that a painting. Let's see. Thank you so much for joining me. Let me know what you think and what I should do next time, and I will see you then.